Good morning, everybody. Good day. Thank you so much for joining our very first session. This is a brand new forum we've been setting up where my intention is to really create a unique new venue where we can have very crisp, clear, and to the point conversations about new topics where you actually walk away learning something. This is an event where I'm not aiming to sell, this is not a pitch or anything, but rather every 2 weeks, I want to come together and take a subject that might be complex or unique or detailed and make it accessible to investors so that you can make actual investment decisions about these sectors, whether that's in public markets or through us or in private markets. My goal here is to keep this to the point and concise. I don't want to keep you here for 2 hours, but rather get to the content in perhaps 30 to 60 minutes, leave some time for Q&A, and then have you get back to your day. The first topic for us to kick off is under the subject of from players to creators, how AI is reshaping gaming and UGC. Now, this has been a big focus for us, but particularly today, we'll also dive into, why have we even chosen such a focus like gaming, which to a lot of investors seems rather disconnected. Doesn't seem that impactful in a time when we're talking about humanoids, when we're talking about going to space, when we're talking about, everything that's going on in government with Doge and efficiency and so forth. But it will make all sense very, very quickly. And so I appreciate taking the time and joining us. This is an awesome combination of a lot of our own limited partners for whom this is a new piece of investor education, as well as some of our new prospects are doing diligence on us. And of course, we've opened these first sessions open to the public. And so over time, this will be a very curated space to really learn more about these emerging segments. So let's jump right in. Before we get started, as I mentioned, the first question to ask is, why do we even care about a segment like gaming as investors? And for that, the best opportunities that I always found as an investor, I first got into crypto in 2016, 2017, 2022, virtual reality. Something that I've found is that the best opportunities tend to hide in the knock-on effects of the consensus trade. And so then the question is, what is the consensus trade right now? Which, maybe you can write in the chat. What do you think is a consensus trade in 2025? I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's technically let me make sure that the chat is enabled. Give me one quick moment. Chat settings. Disable. Anyway, David's on. David's right on Discord in case the chat isn't enabled. I'm going to assume it is enabled. The obvious consensus trade right now is 2 letters. It's AI, right? And what almost everybody agrees upon is that AI is going to give us a huge boost in productivity, both as individuals, but also literally as nations in terms of GDP. All right, I just got a message. The chat is disabled. Just use the Q&A button that you can, if you want to submit a response until, there we go. Attendees can chat with hosts. Boom, just enabled it. So chat works now. Thank you, David. The productivity boost is not just for individuals, but it's literally nation states. And so it's predicted that by 2035, which is a decade from now, AI can literally grow the GDP of developed nations by as much as 35% on average, right? So if it's the understanding that AI is going to give this huge productivity boost, where are people placing their bets? The bets are usually being placed in also the consensus opportunities, like, for example, GPUs, right? Everybody's been buying GPUs because they need them to run large language models. Even startups need them. And so NVIDIA has, of course, been the biggest trade of the decade, where it's at sometimes surpassed Bitcoin's performance, right? But that's only available on the public side. When you look at private markets, the 2 areas that have been getting the most funding is large language models. And so we've been seeing north of $10 billion being placed into each of the major competitors, whether that's OpenAI, Anthropic with Claude, or xAI with Grok. And now the latest trend, of course, is humanoids, where we say, hey, what AI can't just help white-collar work with intellectual tasks, but actually take AI, put it into robots, whole new set of opportunities, where, of course, you've got companies like Tesla innovating, but also Figure made headlines a week ago where they raised it close to a $40 billion valuation. And so everybody seems to be piling into this very narrow way to play the AI revolution. But the challenge with this is that there are uncertainties about this, right? When it comes to LLMs, every 6 weeks there is a new leader of who has the highest performing large language model, right? 1 week, OpenAI is leading, then DeepSeek came out, and the whole market was in scrambles. Only a few weeks later, now Grok 3 came out, and now Grok 3 is in the lead, right? So there's still uncertainty of like who of the large language models will lead. And then as the competition was heating up, people are starting to question, will the value even accrue to the models, or will it accrue to the app layer, right? Meaning the ChatGPT wrappers that we used to make fun of that own the user experience, maybe they are the ones that actually capture the value. And so long story short, there is a lot of uncertainty, but the one certainty we have is that human productivity flourishes, meaning that we actually, the entity or the main beneficiary is literally us. Because as a human society, we'll be able to do more in less time. And this has been a trend that has actually been going on for quite a while, where you look at how technology improves our productivity over long periods of time. And so over the last 150 years, because of our increase in productivity, we actually work less, not more. It might seem like we have this workaholic culture, but in reality, the average human today works about half as much as the average human did in 1870. Back then, you literally woke up, went to the manufacturing plant, and you went to bed, right? And so we are already in this century-long trend that trends down towards working less, and also at the same time having more off time, more vacation days, right? That's trending up and to the right. And at the same time, there's also an increase in the same time span of the last 120 years or so of how much of our dollars can we spend on non-survival, right? So back in, for example, 1901, we would spend only about maybe 22% of our entire earnings on non-necessities. About 80% would go towards shelter and food, right? As technology improves, as our quality of lives improve, the portion of our earnings going towards non-necessities has gone up tremendously. We're now about half the money we make goes towards things on Maslow's hierarchy above shelter, food, education, and so forth, right? So now we spend half our money on non-necessities. So the question then is, okay, if this trend is going up and to the right, it's already at 50%, it can only go to 100, right? So there's at max, it's going to double. But where has that been flowing, right? So we're going to have more time, we're going to have more money. Where does that go? And a material portion of that over the last 3 decades or so has been flowing into the gaming space at accelerating rates. And so the annual industry, this is not total, this is annual industry revenue, has gone up about 800% since 1990. So the whole gaming industry used to make about $25 billion in 1990. It makes more than $200 billion today. And it's then the reason that as we have more time, as we spend more money, there's actual network effects in how we find it more valuable to spend money in these areas because, again, they actually hold more societal value. And so our thesis that has been like motivating a lot of our investment, then we'll get into the nitty-gritty stuff, but I want to make sure that we pick you up where you are first, because everybody talks about AI, everybody thinks that's the huge opportunity. Why do we care about gaming, right? So our thesis is that in the age of AI, human labor will become less essential, meaning, yes, you will still work. You will essentially be an operator of AIs, right? That's kind of like how the peak human works right now. The peak human does not do all the tasks themselves. They're very smart at prompting AI to do some of the tasks for them to allow them to have a bigger output in less of a time. So again, bigger output, less of the time. So in the age of AI, we're going to work less. Our basic needs will be fulfilled. And that will apply across social strata, at least in the very beginning in the developed world. In the developed world, most of the basic needs will be met across the social strata. So then the question is, what do we need? Where does our time and desires go to? It will go towards filling the needs of desire, the desire for connection, entertainment, and challenge, right? Because humans still want to feel a sense of challenge. Like, we don't just want to be like, oh, okay, utopia, AI does all our work, now I'm bored. You want to be challenged, right? You also still want to connect with fellow humans and like do things, be entertained, right? And that specific need is being filled by immersive and interactive technologies, or of course, gaming falls square in the middle. And, in the past, we used the term the metaverse, right? But sometimes when people hear the metaverse, they think it's so abstract, it's ethereal, you don't know what to do with it. But, gaming is a much easier way to maybe describe this as a day one solution, where you say, hey, the convergence of gaming, virtual reality, which we won't talk about today, but I talk about a lot, right? And of course, AI. This convergence is really the foundation of future social and economic ecosystems. And so with that, let's jump into the fun part, right? Because when we talk about this emerging trend that, okay, gaming has grown 8x in annual revenue over the last 30 years. Great. We believe that trend is going to keep going. Great. But even within that, and you might say, hey, I read Matthew Ball's report, which, by the way, shout out. There's an incredible state of the games industry report for 2025. Matthew Ball made this graph is from there. He actually says, hey, it's a bit concerning. Since 2020, we kind of flatline on gaming, right? Because of course the COVID pandemic gave a huge boost, and then it took us some time to catch up. In this report, he focused on where is growth concentrating. Because if you just make an index bet on gaming, you might not perform that well, but you want to focus on, hey, where is the actual growth happening? And he highlights 11 core areas where growth is happening. Today, we will focus on two big ones that I believe are the biggest contributors, which is UGC, which stands for user-generated content, and AI. And so before we jump into it, even in our headline, we talked with my team, we said, should we even put the word UGC? And every time we put a new a research piece out, we use the word UGC and we ask ourselves, do people even know what that even means, right? Like, do you have any context with the word UGC? And so let's first dive quickly into what UGC is, so like it totally makes sense to you, and also why it's so powerful and why it's so important. So let me pick you up where you are, right? Social media, you probably use it every single day in some way, shape, or form, whether you're pontificating as a VC on X, or whether you're posting your avocado toast on Instagram, or whether you're catching up with family on Facebook. At this point, probably everybody, or doing business on LinkedIn, which maybe some of you guys found me through LinkedIn. A lot of today's communication happens on social media, obviously. Social media is nothing more than traditional media combined with UGC. Again, user-generated content means that it's the user, not the central platform, creating content. It is you making a video on vacation and posting it on Instagram, right? It is you taking a picture of your family, your kids, right, and sharing on Facebook. It is you leaving a comment on your best friend's tweet, right? It is you liking that favorite influencer you have, his or thought leader's take that you saw on Twitter, right? Every piece of interaction in social media is user-generated, right? And that's what allowed it. And why is it important? Because ultimately it's so powerful because the user knows what they care about, right? Imagine if YouTube had to figure out what does the user base out there want to see next? There would have been board meetings trying to figure out like, what's the next video we can make, right? But the user knows. The new user flocks towards the videos they want to watch, and the user creates the videos they want to create, which also leads to part two, which is the experimentation engine, right? So let's say the board came up with 20 ideas of what they would want to do. Well, with UGC, you can have a million experiments going on at the same time. You've got a million YouTubers, bloggers, X accounts experimenting with new types of content, different formats, right? Different ideas. And you have got essentially these millions of experiments going on, and the market decides for you what sticks. And then the market is almost like, again, this living being of itself, where new trends emerge without the central entity having to come up with this on their own, right? And of course, finally, it's free scalable creation. Even if the central, let's say YouTube said, you know what? No, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to hire a million video teams. We're going to do all that. That would have it would completely broke the bank. It would have been unsustainable. And so instead, you have access to millions of people that are doing this for free. So it's free, the user knows what they want, and it's a crazy experimentation engine. Now, and at the end, at the heart of it all, really, it's network effects, right? How do you tap into network effects? And so with traditional gaming, it used to be like traditional media, right? So that you have a game studio and a publisher. They say, you know what, we're going to create this game that takes place in this world, and this is the gameplay mechanic. And they take a lot of risk. They're going to build this for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, and then they hope and pray that the users like it. There's going to be testing groups and all that to make sure that they're on the right track. But ultimately, both the studios take a lot of risk, but at the same time, the user's stuck with what's on the menu. Meaning, if all the studios are making just the same low risk garbage, right? That's all you can have. Now, UGC is turning that on its head the same way that social media turned it on its head. You take traditional gaming, you add user-generated content, and you end up with social gaming, right? Where essentially the user, the player, is able to create entire games. They can create modification, which is called or referred to as mods of existing games. So they take their favorite game, all right, and I'm making some changes. They can create maps of the games they already like, or they can even just make in-game items. Like let's say they create new outfits inside their favorite world, right? So all of a sudden, every piece to the hierarchy or every piece to the flow of the experience can now be done by the users. And then we go back and we ask, oh, well, actually, before that. And I liken this to social media a lot because one of the biggest things that makes these network effects take off and is this catalyst for that to happen is the accessibility to quality creator tools. Again, the accessibility to quality creator tools. Part of the reason why, for example, like this US election was almost won by podcasts, right? Like, this crazy thing about it wasn't the mainstream news that was the biggest megaphone. It was podcasts, right? Which 10 years ago was essentially a kid with a camcorder. Some 15-year-old took the mom's camcorder and made YouTube videos. That's kind of what the YouTube scene looked like 10 years ago. Today, it is the media, right? How was that possible? It was possible because you had all of a sudden everybody had access to high quality cameras, high quality microphones, very easy to use editing softwares. Even by now, we're getting further with like AI tools where you just plug in a video, it edits your videos, it makes you reels and so forth. All of a sudden, every regular user that never went to film school is essentially a production studio of their own. And we're getting a taste today of what this end game looks like. This end game looks like that presidential elections in the United States are won on social media, that some larger influencers, let's say, Dana White, of course, runs UFC, but also he's become quite large on social media, which now places him on the Meta board of directors because he's got social influence, right? Or even Elon understanding that, one of the best ways to expand his empire is to own X, right? Now, we're seeing the same thing happening with social gaming because ultimately, not every 15-year-old went to film school the same way. Not every 15-year-old knows how to code. Not every 15-year-old knows how to design 3D objects, right? And so the first birth of that was, let's say, we're putting it a little bit later, let's say 2020, when you had the first creator suites, whether that's, Fortnite Creative or Roblox, where now there are the first no-code UGC platforms, or Minecraft, right? Where kids can make their mini games without needing to know any code. A lot of those no-code drag and drop game makers are still very simple, right? Where the outcomes are kind of limited. So there's some coding still needed to make something very fascinating, but that's exactly where we're heading now. Where you have AI tools that allow you to type in a word like, I need a crossbow, and it spits out a 3D object, fully rendered with texture and everything. And for example, one of our portfolio companies, Sloyd, does exactly that, where you type, text to 3D object exists, works now, right? Having no-code world builders, or also like Unreal Engine co-pilots. And we'll talk about all this in a little bit more detail in a moment. But essentially, what the AI stack brings to the table, besides freeing up the time and giving us leisure and giving us money to spend, is it will make 3D content creation super, super easy, where we're going to see the same explosion where everybody is now a content creator on social media. Everybody will be able to make spatial experiences, right? Everybody will be able to make mini games to play with their friends. Everybody will be able to, like, engage the audience in a whole new venue. And this is powerful because, again, going back to those three pillars, one, the player knows what they want, right? They know what they care about. And so all of a sudden, instead of a studio sitting there guessing, hey, how do we keep this fresh? We're on Call of Duty bazillion, right? We're on GTA 6. We're on, like, a lot of these series, like there's like a dozen plus Assassin's Creed at this point. How do we keep it fresh, right? Let the players figure it out. The players know what they want, and if they don't know what they want, they're the experimentation engine. They're going to make 1 million games, and 999,000 of them will suck. Most of them will not be good, but there will be 100, maybe 1,000, maybe 10 really incredible new things where we're like, wow, we just picked onto something that people love, and we double down on that, right? And all this, for the most part, is free scalable creation, where just like social media, there is revenue shares, right? Like YouTubers earn shares on the views, the same way Roblox, for example, pays its creators based on how much traction they're getting. In fact, Roblox has paid out about $1 billion in 2024. That's how much they're already sharing with the community creators. And talking about Roblox, right, just to get a taste of how big this is already getting, what you're looking at is the average monthly hours of engagement, right? And this excludes off-platform stuff like YouTube and Twitch. We're talking about on-platform. We're talking about like logging in Roblox, playing a game on Roblox. Today, there's about, people are spending about 6 to 7 billion hours a month on Roblox, right? And we saw this trend take off when the digital native generation started to become old enough to play it. Meaning, and again, when the iPad was released in 2010, right, a whole new generation was born that grew up on iPads, iPhones, and so forth. To them, this was normal. This was native, right? When they became, about, old enough to play these games, like 10 years old, we started seeing the graph grow really, really fast, right? And what's interesting about this graph is that there was a starting point to the digital native generation. There is no end to it, right? We're still in this time frame where we're really only talking about a 10-year age cohort out of the 80-year human lifespan. And to put further context on, this, Roblox has close to 400 million monthly active users. 400, like, with maybe 360, 370 million monthly active users, which, Japan, I think, has a population of 120 million, something to that tune. It's roughly the population of America, right? Roughly the population of America logs in at least once on Roblox every month. That's how big it is. And it's bigger than 2 times all the Nintendo Switch players out there. It's almost 3 times all the PlayStation monthly players out there. It's almost 7 times all the Xbox players out there, right? And so what's different again, right? And then funny enough, the runner-ups are Minecraft, which also is a UGC platform. And so we're seeing that these UGC platforms are quite out smoking the entire rest of the gaming industry, right? So that is when you have this already big industry that's growing, most of the growth is flowing there. And in fact, we're seeing this in trends too, when ask Generation Alpha, what are they looking for, right? What are they looking for in games? And the biggest category growth is building and creating, where it said it was plus 7% from Q1 2021 to Q1 2022. Building and creating is essentially the meta, where kids saying, hey, I don't want to just be fed what to play and given a structure. Let me build my own games. Let me create, my own gameplay. Give me a social sandbox, a place to hang out with my friends, and we'll figure out. The same way that, when I was growing up, you put kids in the garden, you give them a couple tools, and they come up with their imagination comes up with all the games themselves, right? You have an infinite imagination of what to do. That's essentially what kids are craving these days and doing these days. And so for Generation and much Gen Z, social gaming is the new social media. And that's really important to understand, because when we think about social media, those are trillion-dollar companies, right? Like Meta, or even, big companies like, X and so forth. Gaming is that. It's not becoming that, it is that for Generation Alpha. And it's their third place. The third place is essentially the place where people spend most time outside of work/school and home, right? So maybe millennials would go to the malls or go to the movie theaters, right? Social gaming is the third place for Generation Alpha. The same way, social media was the third place for Gen Z, right? It's also that public square, right? The same way that maybe VCs love to hang out on Twitter, right? Fortnite lobbies and Roblox is where they hang out, right? Or even Twitch streams, where in the chat room on Twitch streams, quite frankly. And that's what's been even visible with the voices inside these worlds, meaning the leading voices inside the gaming worlds are already worth hundreds of millions of dollars, meaning the biggest streamers like XQC or Aiden Ross are getting $100 million contracts, right, from stream platforms. So they're essentially the LeBron James of their generation in terms of how the market values them, right? That's how large the value already is for these worlds. So within 10 years, you'll have most of the economy onboarded through digitally native generations, right? You might say, look, Gen X, boomers, we're not going to get on these platforms. I would say two things. One, even if you didn't, it doesn't really matter that much, because within 10 years, most of the tax paying in your consuming economy is digitally native. That was scary to write the slide. I'm a millennial, and seeing that in 10 years from now, millennials will be age 40 to 55. Where has time gone? Right? But in 10 years from now, millennials will be age 40 to 55. Gen Z will be 25 to 40. Gen Alpha will be 10 to 25. And Generation Beta, which is the new one, will be 0 to 10. Gen Beta pretty much only starts being born now, 2025. So part one is you might not need to. But the actual answer, I would say, is you probably will. For example, like on Instagram, on social media, I was the first member in my family on social media. By now, I joined Facebook, I think in 2008. Today, my grandma has an Instagram account just so she can watch her grandchildren's stories and keep up with their lives, right? So I think it's the odds actually very, very high that not only are we going to continue having new generations of digitally native users come in, but also we're going to continuously age up, right? As the bulk of the action starts happening in these social gaming worlds. And so now we get to the important part. How do we as investors place our bets on this emerging trend as it's leaving the early adopter phase and growing towards mainstream accelerated by AI, right? So I hope by now we understand that, look, AI is going to give us more time, give us more money, right? A lot of that, it's not just prediction, Felix says it will be flowing into gaming. It has been flowing to gaming. Gaming is one of the fastest growing leisure spaces. It's the number one leisure space for Gen A and Gen Z, right? That's where the puck is going, and that's where it is. And the AI creation tools are only going to accelerate the trend of enabling people to create UGC. And UGC was the very thing that made social media go viral, right? So we are bucketing this investment opportunity really into four different buckets. You've got platforms, you've got tooling, you've got social infrastructure, and you've got talent. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a few examples. Sorry, I'm going to give you a few examples, both public, growth stage, and private, meaning some of the deals that we've done. I purposely, with these presentations, I want to make sure that I make them as value-driven as possible. So it's not just me going to be shilling my own portfolio companies, but rather really giving you a broad perspective of what are the different players and what are the different opportunities for each. And so let's dive right in. When it comes to platforms, we're going to talk about three, which is Roblox, Squiddo, and there's a stealth startup that we're currently talking to. So we've already talked ad nauseum about Roblox. Roblox obviously is the 10-pound gorilla, so to say, in the room, right? 10 pounds actually super, super light. I think it's a different 10-ton gorilla, 10 kilo. I don't know. It's a much larger number. But anyway, it's the big gorilla in the room, Roblox, which currently, again, owns the most monthly users across all platforms. It has an incredible amount of hours spent. It is also a large publicly traded company. I believe, last time I checked, Roblox market cap was about 60 billion market. Anyway, it's somewhere around that realm, it's 40 billion, right? So Roblox is about $40 billion market cap, which you might say is a lot, but also it's quite nothing compared to Meta's market cap. So that's obviously the current incumbent that everybody in this space looks towards. Then you've got early stage opportunities, like for example, Squiddo, which is a company we backed, that is one of the fastest growing UGC platforms in virtual reality. Because the question to ask, okay, so you already have the incumbent, you've got Roblox. How do you compete against Roblox, right? And so people come and pitch me and say, oh, we're building the next Roblox. Okay, but why are you going to win, right? If you're competing for the exact same segment, the chance of you winning is very, 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 very low, right? You need to bring something new to the table. And so in Squiddo's case, they are owning VR, right? And so they are essentially enabling kids to build their own mini games inside of virtual reality. So this is a whole blue ocean where they can get a lot of traction. And, we actually even have a slide on this. Up. We can see the active users went from virtually zero to close to 400,000 in less than a year, right? So they really only kicked off DigiGods in, I believe it was April. It was April of last year in early access, like private beta, and by now over 400,000 active users, right? So it's kind of growing up and to the right because that's a place where Roblox isn't competing. They have Roblox VR, but it's really bad. And so they are completely kicking their butts in it. And while Roblox has a 40 billion market cap, we invested in Squiddo at a 9 million pre-money valuation. So of course, you've got quite a delta there where if Squiddo succeeds and VR becomes big, there is a massive multiple to be made. Then there's another company that takes a different approach. So, we say, well, Roblox owns, call it desktop, mobile, UGC currently. Well, there's blue oceans like VR. Okay, so that's a place where we can place a bet, right? Then there's another area. So this is a stealth startup. I made all their names stealth because it's currently in due diligence. And until we invest, we're not going to share the name. As the saying from crypto goes, fill before you show. And so there's a startup that essentially figured out, hey, you've got all this single player IP. You've got famous popular games that people love, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto, Wukong, I mean, you name it, right? Like all these different games, Elden Ring. How do you take these games that have millions of players that people love and turn them into UGC platforms? And so essentially the startup that we're looking at, they are creating an entire tech stack and pipeline to turn single player games into multiplayer UGC platforms, making it super easy for any IP, whether it's an indie title or big title, to turn a single player game to multiplayer and also allow their own players to create new maps, new game modes, in-game items, and so forth, and really make it this living and breathing thing that benefits from the three benefits I mentioned: players know what they want, experimentation, and free scale, right? And a lot of the existing IP has been actually very welcome to this because they know whenever they are able to add UGC, the unit sales go up, right? So people might say, why would I want developers like modders to be able to touch my code and add modifications to my game? It's my game, right? Or like, why would I want them to even be able to monetize it, right? Games like Skyrim by Bethesda are still selling millions of units because it is I think by now, besides Minecraft, it's the single most modded game in the world. People keep coming back because there's always fresh content. And guess what? The studio doesn't have to make it. Bethesda does not need to make it. In fact, sometimes Bethesda comes and says, what were the best mods made? Let's bundle them together and sell them as the definitive edition, the actual final definitive edition, right? And so there's always new versions, right? And so this company that's indeed, essentially creates a whole tech stack. How can you take any game and make it a UGC platform? Huge opportunity. Why? Because it's now, as of 2 days ago, there was a leak that Grand Theft Auto 6, the game that's been in development for years, it is the single most anticipated game, I think, of all time currently. There's an entire meme culture about things happening before Grand Theft Auto launches. It's been leaked now that Grand Theft Auto 6 will also have its own UGC platform. So again, that is where the puck is going. Hence, we're trying to capitalize on it. And yes, we just looked at this one. The second bucket is tooling, right? So on one hand, you have the platforms, but then when it comes to how do you even enable millions or even billions of users to create these 3D experiences? Well, you need incredible tooling. And there's many different players. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is Unity. So virtually all mobile apps that you're using are designed in Unity. A lot of games are designed in Unity. Essentially, the two big game engines that exist are Unreal Engine, which is owned by Epic Games, which is owned to a large degree by Tencent. And then there's Unity, which is its own publicly traded company. It's dollar symbol U. By the way, Roblox is dollar symbol RBLX. By the way, none of these are investment recommendation. I forgot to give my disclaimer at the beginning. Everything is risk, right? And obviously, I don't benefit from you buying publicly traded stocks, but I want to again make this a very blended and like holistic view of the market, not just sharing some of our own companies. And so again, one of the biggest game engines that's publicly traded is Unity. Another one is Autodesk, also publicly traded. Autodesk essentially has a lot of 3D creation tools, whether that is for gaming or whether it's even for enterprise, like, when car manufacturers model out their next vehicle, right? A lot of them use Autodesk infrastructure. Essentially, Autodesk is like the 3D competitor to Adobe's 2D offering, if you want to like kind of use a mental framework. Another big company that's probably less known is Overwolf. We're not invested, but we've invested alongside this. So Autodesk invested in Sloyd, one of our portfolio companies, and Overwolf, I believe, invested in 2 or 3 of our companies. Overwolf is perhaps the biggest modding / gaming tools platform company that currently exists. They're a late stage company. So they raised at roughly a $500 million valuation back in 2021. It is expected / rumored that they're likely unicorn by now. So this is likely the biggest unicorn that currently exists in modding and game tooling, right? One of the companies that we've backed with Fund 2 is a very early stage startup, meaning we're talking a $4 million market cap, $4 million valuation, was 4.9 million valuation, which is Ludus AI. One of the trends we've been observing is that when it comes to traditional coding, there's this new movement towards AI copilots, right? Where you saw companies like Cursor go from 0 to $100 million in ARR in 21 months with a very small team. What does Cursor do? Cursor essentially copilot that can write entire code for you. It can tell you where you had written bugs. And essentially, it's your partner that helps you code more efficiently, faster, and more correctly, right? Of course, on the more correctly part, there's 2 different camps. There's the vibe coding and the purists. But essentially, there's this whole new set of companies like Cursor, Lovable, Bolt, that help people develop software faster, more efficiently using AI. And these companies, they're not just valued a lot, but they're actually making a ton of revenue, right? These companies went to 50, 20, 10, 100 million ARR in anywhere from 2 months to 20 months. What we realized is that does not directly translate to game development. And there was no core player yet that did what Cursor did for game development. And so we found this company called Ludus, which is the first live Unreal Engine plugin that allows you to essentially have an AI copilot inside your game development. And so it can read your blueprints, it can fix blueprints, give you feedback on it. Right now, they're in the early stage where essentially it can look for explain you your own documentation in your blueprint. There's multiple different steps on the roadmap that we will release in the next month, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it will go all the way to it creating whole 3D object, putting it into your environment, writing your logic trees, finding errors, essentially doing all the actual coding and design for you. Where the end game is, it can actually become a full-on game engine in and of itself. Right. So like for us, of course, as an early stage venture fund, we always play the early stage where we see, hey, who is the biggest disruptor? Meaning, who could essentially unsee Unity, right? And we believe a company like Ludus is in the perfect path to build a great business like Cursor, but one day even, become the next big game engine. The third bucket we're talking about is social infrastructure. And there we've got some big companies like Discord, which is currently pre-IPO. I believe Discord will IPO this year. For those that don't know, Discord is the biggest communications channel for all gaming. In fact, by now it's transcended gaming, where it's also used in industries like crypto, but by now it's also used for some startups. Well, many startups use Discord as their new Slack. And what makes Discord unique is that it's essentially this all-in platform where you can have communities, you can have video chat, you can play games inside of Discord, people stream from inside Discord. There's monetization, there's questing to bring people into new games. It's this whole new ecosystem that essentially is the social layer across all games, meaning no matter whether you play Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, Counter-Strike, Elden Ring, Wukong, it doesn't, like all the single player games, it doesn't matter. Whatever you play, you're probably still using the social layer of Discord underneath. Meaning that's where you connect with your friends. That's where you find out who are you matching up with. Whenever you play multiplayer, you probably have a voice chat through Discord, not through the game, right? So Discord is a social layer underneath all of gaming. So whenever that IPOs, pay attention to it. We found a company that essentially is building the whole social layer underneath virtual reality, and that's Live. And so what Live did is essentially it built the iPhone inside of VR. Live launched this technology where inside I think more than 50% of the biggest games in VR, including the number 1 and number 2 biggest games in VR, you now have a camera, a physical camera you can pick up from the wall, and that has a tablet. And this tablet is owned by Live, essentially, where you can, for example, say, hey, I want to create a drone footage of me inside of virtual reality. I want to take selfie videos. I want to, place the camera somewhere. And so essentially they're building this whole social layer where people can create content inside of VR. And they now have, within 2 weeks of launching, they went all the way to 1.5 million monthly active users within 2 weeks of launching. I have to check with the founder because this was in December, so the number is probably higher at this point. My guess is they're probably in the 2 to 3 million range. As of now, they are, based on the number I already know, they are already the 3rd most used application in all of VR. Why? Again, because just like Discord, it doesn't matter whether you play Gorilla Tag, Yeeps, Veil, name all the other games. You're probably using Live as the social layer underneath, right? And that's the company we had in Fund 1. There's another company that's, again, another stealth company that's currently due diligence, where they realized, hey, one of the biggest issues that games have is twofold. One, there's a lot of cheaters, and cheating makes games unenjoyable because you want to try to have a good experience, and some stranger across the world is breaking the rules and making it unenjoyable for everybody else. What does it lead to? Player churn. What does player churn lead to? Games make less money, right? So there's an actual reason here why both players and studios want to incentivize less cheating. And of course, there's also second issue, child protection, right? Obviously, one of the biggest user bases of gaming is children. And we want to make sure that children are safe. And so we realized how to make sure that there's an actual judicial system, if you want, inside gaming. Essentially, is creating this KYC social layer, essentially, for all of gaming, where you have to actually KYC yourself, right? Like use your ID, know your customer, show, I'm this person, and you get an ID that is used for all the games. Now, when you cheat or when you do something inappropriate, you break the rules, you get kicked out. And now all of a sudden you're kicked out from all the games. Or, maybe you get timed out for 2 weeks, right? So, but essentially you're able to create this whole social/judicial system across the entire gaming space to make it a funner, fairer, and safer place for all parties involved, which again also makes gaming less toxic, more enjoyable, which leads to bigger revenues for the actual games. And again, this is something where when you really think about it, it doesn't make sense for a single incumbent to build this. Why? Because again, it needs to be adopted by everybody to make sense. So this social infrastructure is very unique and interesting because it's this layer that spans across everything. And fourth and finally, it's talent. And that's a tricky one to play, but we've started studying it and also making our first investments in it. So I'll give you 2 examples here. There aren't really any public companies for this or really late stage for this. But there's a company called Voldex. We didn't back them. Our friends over at Andreessen recently led the round. I was just talking to Andrew Chen last week, where he mentioned, and now this is public information, Voldex is essentially the biggest game maker inside Roblox. They decided, hey, Roblox is this new public square, let's own all the content, right? Roblox is making content. Why don't we make the content, right? So, well, Roblox is making content, but they essentially started making games really fast, a lot of them, to see what sticks, what do people like. Now they also said, hey, why do we acquire studios? And so Voldex acquired, on the right side, one of the most played games in the world called Brookhaven. So Brookhaven, I think, was the #2 most played game on Roblox with 120 million monthly active players, right? And 60 billion visits, right? 120 monthly active players, which means we're talking like 1/3 of Roblox's total monthly players. So Voldex said, you know what? We're going to acquire them. We're going to start buying out the leading Roblox studios, right? So all of a sudden, you've got this talent content play where you would have thought, who would buy studios inside of Roblox? Well, guess what? Roblox is big enough now where there can be unicorn opportunities within Roblox, right? So Voldex is one example. Another one is DressX, which we invested in with Fund One, where DressX is the #1 digital fashion company in the world, right? They have distributed more digital fashion outfits in Roblox than anyone else. They've distributed more digital fashion outfits on Snapchat than anyone else. They've distributed more digital fashion outfits on Meta, like Horizon Store, than anyone else. A lot of the digital fashion out there was made by DressX. Some of them have the name literally on the chest, like this sweatshirt, which is one of the most popular items. Or they've partnered with like Balenciaga, Adidas, Prada, Louis Vuitton, Tommy Hilfiger, you name it, right? So they partner with existing fashion labels and bring them into these digital worlds. Crazy stat here is that, I first discovered DressX back in 2021. Back then, they've sold 1,700 units. By 2022, they've sold like 300,000 units, which is great. Back then, some of these were NFTs. 2023, they almost 10x that. Wow. And they distributed 2.6 million units. Last year, they distributed over 78 million digital fashion units, right? And so partially, I probably shouldn't just label them as talent. They also technically build tooling because they've got the #1 tooling for creating digital fashion, where, for example, kids can now use Gen AI to create outfits for avatars, right? So building a whole avatar engine if you want. But as of right now, they make perhaps 40-50% of all the digital fashion items themselves. So they're also the biggest producer, right? So you have to think about, well, if social gaming is becoming new social media, if that's the new public square, if that's where we spend all our time and money, right? The same way that we used to care about what the brands we wear to school, to the mall, to dates, and so forth, kids care a lot of what they wear in these social worlds. And so, we made this bet that, hey, if digital worlds take off, digital fashion will take off. And that bet was right. And so ultimately, these are two unique ways to play talent, but that's just the beginning. I think we're very early still, and we're studying the space, but still very early on how this talent space is developing. And so to sum it up, the 4 buckets we're looking at, and I want to really give you a holistic view here, right? There are platforms, there's tooling, there's social infrastructure is talent. There are many ways to play it. You can play it on public markets. And I think the ideal way is to do both. Like I don't own many stocks because I put almost most of my net worth in my own funds, fact. But I own some shares of Roblox because I'm bullish on them, right? But then, you can play public markets like Roblox. Unity has its own challenges. Unity's been kind of on a decline because people didn't like the pricing models. They saw lashback. People are looking for alternatives. There's now AI competitors coming up, right? So there's some risks there. There's pre-IPOs. There's things to pay attention like Discord, right? But then there's this huge swath opportunity of early stage plays, which really is what we focus on, where you can invest pre-seed, seed stage evaluations like 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 20 million, which is our focus area, right? We try to invest between $5 to $20 million. That's really our sweet spot where we first get involved because we believe that there will be trillion and billion-dollar opportunities coming out of this. In fact, by now, I hope it's clear, social media is becoming social gaming. And it's important to understand the scale of each of these buckets. The winning platforms will be worth trillions, the same way that Meta is worth trillions. The social layer in a multi-platform world will also be worth trillions because if in the case of, for example, let's say there's 2 different outcomes. Let's say there is one big winner that eats everything. Let's say Roblox becomes a big winner. By now they've already got high fidelity first person shooters. Maybe at some point they become so big they just eat everything up. Possible. I don't know. Then there's the opportunity. We have multiple platforms. You're going to have Roblox. You're going to have Fortnite. You're going to have Minecraft. You're going to have, let's say, the platform that I said that allows single player games to become multiplayer games, right? So you're going to have modding platforms. You're going to have new upstarts like Squiddo or Gorilla Tag, right? So you've got this multi-platform world. Well, in that world, you need a social layer that connects all of it, right? Again, big winner so far, Discord. But there are upcomers like, for example, Live that we place a big bet on with Fund 1, or this company in Stealth that we're looking at with Fund 2. Then, of course, there's tooling. Tooling is probably not going to be worth trillions of dollars, but it is going to be worth billions, right? Again, we look at comms like Unity, Autodesk, and so forth. Or, from the social media world, there were video editing softwares acquired for billions of dollars by Adobe, right? Canva, right? Again, another tool for the 2D world that is about to IPO that's worth billions of dollars. So tooling is a billion-dollar play, right? And then, of course, winning talent is an interesting platform agnostic bet worth billions, right? So if we're unclear who's going to win the platform wars, right? The beautiful thing about DressX, for example, is that they don't care who wins, right? They produce and sell and distribute digital fashion across everybody. Meta, Snapchat, Roblox, even the Web3 ones, like the Decentraland, Sandbox, everything, right? They're just like, we're everywhere. We don't care, right? And that's interesting, right? Because at that point, you have another bet that is essentially uncorrelated from the platform risk that some of the other things have, right? But at the end of the day, the future will be spatial, and trillion-dollar opportunities will emerge to own these virtual spaces where we spend our time in an exponentially AI world. And ultimately, time to place bets is now. And that's what we've been focused on for the last 3 years. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope, how do we do? About an hour in time. I'm open for Q&A. I'm going to stick around as long as you need me, as long as you have questions. The chat is enabled now. I don't think it was enabled before. And I hope this was valuable. I'm also very, very open and interested in feedback from you guys, how we can make these sessions more valuable, because this is not a one-off webinar. We're trying to do these every 2 weeks to bring you value and to bring something that might seem specific or expert and make it simple and understandable for you to, whether it's just to educate yourself or if you actually want to invest and form a thesis, right? Whether that's with us or through public markets, right? I want to make this kind of like an intellectual safe space, if you want, where maybe a year from now, we can have 1,000+ family offices simply join us every single 2 weeks to learn from us and see us as a source of truth. Any questions or QA so far? Let me see. I had a full house today, our first session, over 30 attendees, a lot of our LPs in the house. I see, shout out to Ricardo from Protein Capital. I see Xiang, good to see you. Rahel from the XR Hackathons. Great. Let's see, first question. Do you see Near Protocol playing a substantial part moving forward? So the honest truth is obviously I'm a big Web3 investor. I've been in Web3 in different capacities, 2016, full-time investor 2017, professional asset manager 2018. Web3 is still very, very early when it comes to the worlds of gaming and UGC. So I haven't found anything materially investable when it comes to the space. I'm watching it so far. My favorite bet when it comes to Web3 gaming essentially is Cathedral Studios. And you guys, if you follow us, you know this. We made large. We were the first investor in Cathedral Studios. And we continue to invest in Cathedral Studios. They essentially made a really fast-growing gaming title that's currently the top 150 most wishlisted game on all of Steam, the Bornless. So they're an incredible indie studio team that is building with Web3 mechanics built in. So for example, assets can be turned into NFTs. There's NFT gameplay. You can earn in-game currency and so forth. So they're building all that. But what's interesting is like a cathedral, essentially. The Borderless is, of course, the launch title, but now they're building an entire Web3 gaming infra that will be scalable and usable by everybody else. So in a way, there's a path to Cathedral becoming an L1 of themselves, but really they want to become the leading Web3 games publisher. So they're going to create all the tools for example, using Web3 to incentivize UGC. I think that's the only and main reason where it's really interesting, where, again, why is UGC interesting? It creates network effects, right? Crypto is actually very useful to generate network effects. Why? Because, for example, what if you just unleash IP, associate tokens with it, and, for example, the IP holders can say, you know what? We are able to give IP ownership tokens towards the UGC that enhances our IP the most. So let's say I'm Skyrim, you build a mod that draws the most amount, like for example, Forgotten City, right, was like a really huge mod of Skyrim that became a game of its own. Instead of it becoming a game of its own, Bethesda could have said, you know what, we're gonna, in this case, Skyrim IP is tied to Skyrim token, right? They could have said, you know what, you've contributed 5% of our revenues, we're gonna give you 5% of Skyrim IP tokens. Now, the token holders not only economically rewarded, but also now they're incentivized. How do we create more value towards this IP, right? And essentially, any player and a user can say, "Hey, you know what? I can not only contribute intellectually and for joy, which currently that all of UGC modding essentially is based on joy, right? It's like players build stuff that they love and play things that they enjoy, right? And so to really scale it, right, to allow people to go from, because this is the important trajectory, going from hobbyists to professionalized, right? 2015, there was a lot of hobbyist YouTubers. Today, they are professional YouTubers. People like Mr. Beast are making, I believe, hundreds of millions of dollars with YouTube, which then allows them to spend tens of millions of dollars on productions. Like the Beast games, I think, cost them north of $10 million, right? So if we want to see even more ambitious and bigger, mods and UGC creators need to get paid, right? And so I do think that crypto is an angle to accomplish that. Full circling back on the question, Near Protocol, SUI, IMX, all these guys, there's very little fall through. I'll throw people on the bus. I'll be honest, right? There's even IMX, which is the gaming blockchain. There's just so little to show for it. So I am neither. So with Fund 2, for example, we are very, very cautious with placing bets on the Web3 angle of it. And I have a very honest pulse on it because by now I've backed, I guess I've probably backed close to 10 game studios, right? X Lab, Squiddo Studio, Sin Studio, MYR, Cathedral Studio, bunch of others. And I get a pulse from them, like, do they think it's valuable to build on XYZ blockchain? What do they bring to the table, right? And the things I hear in private are pretty underwhelming, right? So I think it's something worth keeping an eye on, but it's not a value driver currently. JPS, do you think there is still value capture for social media UGC or just games? I think we're in the late majority part of the adoption cycle when it comes to social media. Why do I think this? And I wrote about this in my annual report. My annual report, this was one of my core theses, that we're in the age of influence, right? We're not early adopters of social media anymore. We're not early majority, we're late majority now. Why do you see this? Everybody woke up yesterday and realized, oops, I need a personal brand. I need to go on podcasts, right? In the last 6 months, you've seen heads of states go on podcasts. Vladimir Putin did an episode with Tucker Carlson. Zelensky did an episode with Lex Friedman. Trump was on Joe Rogan, right? The list and caliber of names making their rounds on podcasts now just went up tenfold. Even, people like Mark Andreessen, right? who wasn't all, he was active in blogging before, but now he's making his rounds on the podcast circle. He will go on the Jordan Peterson show. He will go on not Impact Reality, Impact Theory, Impact Theory, right? And all of a sudden, there's these podcast tours that now real world leaders are making, right? So I think we're in the late stage of it. So does it mean it's over, it's too late? No, I think it simply means if you want to be in business, you better be making content. In other words, also, why are we taking time, right, to make free education, right? Of course, from the bottom of my heart, right? And I want to do LP education, but also it's important that the theses that I have, that I work on, they don't just exist in my head. I need to share them with the world, right? In order, of course, to also be known. So I think we're still in the late stages, but it's important for everybody to have a brand. Rodolfo asks, solid format bullish. I'm in exchange with JP about you guys possibly investing in our Cool. Yeah, we'll take a look. I mean, we've invested a lot of VR. VR was one of the big segments for Fund One. We've done quite a bit of VR in Fund Two already. We've publicly backed 4 companies so far with Fund Two. 2 of them being VR, one being Cognitive 3D, which does does 3D analytics, so that essentially you can see where are players walking, where they're looking, where they're spending their time in virtual environments, right? Which currently we only have 2D analytics, meaning where are people clicking, where people point their cursor, right? When are they logging off, right? So spatial analytics, another cool thing in the tooling space we've backed. And of course, Squiddo, which we mentioned today as the Roblox killer of VR. We're very selective nowadays with VR just because the market has some platform risk with Meta, right? Meta needs to really win or find some good competition. Those are, I see there's a whole nother section of Q&A not on the questions, but on the Q&A format. Perfect. Marcel asks, I think we are in difficult situation with high valuations in tech and crypto. My concern at the moment is buying the top, for example, for Roblox. What do you think? Good question, Marcel. So with crypto, I to some degree agree. I've been very vocal about this on Twitter. I currently hold, I hold Maple, but besides, because Maple is weirdly uncorrelated to all the rest of the crypto market, but I hold $0 crypto right now. I'm not just saying Felix, I'm saying the crypto fund currently holds 0 crypto. We sold, I think, on February 18th, and since then, I think Solana dropped from 177 down to 136 or so. I think crypto is currently struggling with we're going through a repricing, but not the repricing holders like. Repricing work both ways, right? And so I think crypto essentially, and I tweeted about this where I said, in VR, a startup that makes $1 million in revenue will be likely valued around $10 million. In AI, a startup that makes $1 million in revenue will be valued at 100 million valuation. In crypto, a company that makes 100 million, 1 million in VR, 10 million valuation. 1 million in AI, 100 million valuation. 1 million revenue in crypto, they'll be worth $1 to $10 billion. It's just far out there, detached from reality. And it's always been based on future multiples because we're literally in the game with crypto of network effects, right? Metcalfe's law, Reed's law, all the different network effect laws, right? That essentially mean growth happens logarithmically, exponentially, and so forth. And so we're always future pricing, but then 7 years later, you say, okay, we've been future pricing for 7 years. We're still growing linearly. Like if you look at DeepIn, for example, right? DeepIn used to make 6 figures in revenue. Now they make 7 figures. Congratulations, you're Helium, and you make $1 million a year in revenue, but you're still worth $1 billion. At some point, those valuation multiples don't make sense. And so my thesis there is that we're going to have a contraction where the valuations, they can literally drop 90% and they still be in the range of what they're still high, right? And so, anyway, that's a whole different discussion for a different day. Bring it back to Roblox. Honestly, I don't think Roblox is that overpriced. When you look at most of the tech space, so the S&P 500, went to all-time highs. But if you remove the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven, things like Nvidia and Apple and Microsoft and Tesla and Meta, if you remove the Mag 7, which did most of the gains, most of the S&P is actually flat. Most companies did not appreciate since their old highs. And so when you look at the Roblox chart, for context, I did buy Roblox. When was this? Like at 27, $28 in like 2023. Now it's 60. In fact, I bought more Roblox at like $62 a couple weeks ago. So like I still believe it's early. Why? Because at the peak, Roblox was worth like 150. And again, revenues and user base is literally up and to the right. So yeah, but I will say I treat my public stock investing very differently than my trading. My public stocks are these things that I hold for like 10 years. And they're also, again, materially smaller positions than what I do with my funds, right? Because my funds, again, are my biggest investment. Most of my money is in my funds, right? But on Roblox, you place a bet and you say, you know what, I think over the next 10 years, this will be up tenfold, right? Like if I say, okay, Roblox will probably be worth, 300 billion in the next 10 years. Okay, cool. Let me buy it, forget about it, not pay capital gains on it for a decade, and then long term, maybe we don't even have tax if we abolish the IRS, who knows? But anyway, so I think it's a fair buy, right? But again, not a buying recommendation, none of this buying recommendation, investing as risk. And ultimately, the real outsized returns come from the early stage companies that will be acquired by Roblox and so forth, right? So like my belief is that some of our portfolio companies that we invested at a 5 million valuation will end up being bought by Epic Games, Unity, Roblox, Discord, and so forth for $500 million plus, right? And that's where we have the actual unicorn potential. That's where we have the 100x, 1000x potential that can really make Vintage one of the best performing assets, right? Let's see. What do you think of the convergence of the competitive reality shows in UGC? Squid Games Netflix show, Squid Games reality show Netflix, Beast Games on Amazon Prime, Beast Games reimagined on Roblox. That's for Alan. I think it makes sense. It makes sense because essentially what you're able to do is you're able to scale user engagement, right? Reality shows always have they're episodic, they are repeatable, they feel relatable to people because it's normal people drawn out of everyday life, and maybe it's even a tiny amount of network effects where you're everybody, every person that the contestant knows will be watching, and they will be telling everybody, oh my god, a friend of mine is on The Bachelor, and so then they tell, and it's again there's some level of network effects. This can now happen on steroids where everybody can be contestant, everybody can be a participant. And it's interesting that Generation Alpha and maybe like some part of Generation Z is less interested in passive consumption and they want to be more in the driver's seat. Meaning they say, hey, I don't want to just be watching the competition, only partake in it, right? And this is powerful. Plus, it actually allows a whole new way of like brand engagement, right? And I think Mr. Beast is doing an incredible job at that, right? Mr. Beast started as a content creator on YouTube, right? But he was one of the first to pivot, for example, into UEFN. UEFN being the Unreal Engine for Fortnite, where you are able to create games inside of the whole Fortnite framework. So, for example, like one time, I played a game, a Mr. Beast game where it's like a zombie shooter inside a mall, which was based on a video he made, where he challenged a guy, you have to survive inside this grocery store. You can't leave for 100 days. How long do you make it? Every day you survive, you make more money, right? So that's the YouTube video. They said, hey, how to make this even cooler in a video game? Because video games know no bounds. They know no limits. So it was said, how long can you survive in a grocery store that's filled with zombies, right? And I believe, if I remember right, there was like product placements for some of his maybe like energy drinks and things like that inside the game. So now you can move product inside the game too, right? So games are just like a perfect format for deeply engaging users and also making more repeatable. And I think one of the things that we briefly touched upon that I didn't mention enough is this is where AI comes in with UGC. I'm looking for the slide, my bad, 1 second. It was the timeline slide right here. So I said, oh, you know what? It wasn't on there because it was on a prior version of the slide and it got cut out of the slide. What AI tooling does is that it allows people to not only stage one, allow normal people to create 3D experiences in games. Okay. Stage two, allow normal people to create great 3D experiences, games, and so forth. Stage three, allow normal people to create great games and experiences rapidly fast. The AI tooling will get to the point that content creators will be able to drop mini games every single day, the same way that they drop Instagram posts every single day. So there will be gaming creators where every day there's a new mini game. Again, it's not going to be huge and complex, but it will be a new mini game where their following will be eager to log on and join and play that day. And maybe, just maybe, that game only exists for that single day. And then it's gone, which means the tune-in rate is massive. And then again, value is attention. Is there value if you, let's say, can get 10 million followers to log into a spatial world every single day? Yes or no? Of course, right? Whether it's product placements, subscriptions, you name it, there are ways to monetize that. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but yes, Rahel, I think that's Farhan, I think this cross-pollination makes all the sense. The same way that we started cross-pollinating social content. I think people are just waking up, especially somebody like Mr. Beast, is that gaming is just another piece of the social ecosystem, right? You already know that if you write a blog post, you should then make it a tweet about it. You should then make an infographic for LinkedIn about it. You should then make a podcast about it. You should then make an explaining YouTube video about it, right? The next stage of all this is that how do you turn that into a game? Right? And obviously, Mr. Beast is the creme de la creme when it comes to building a media empire. He is hardcore leading the charge on moving content creation into games, right? So I think that's not that Mr. Beast is doing this and it's unique. It's more so he's giving you a glimpse in the future of what most content creators will be doing. Great. Any more questions? I really appreciate you guys all joining us today and learning about this, getting familiarized. If you're one of our LPs, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. Your support is what makes this possible. I know I saw some of our fun 2 LPs in here earlier. And that because of you, we can back companies like Ludus, Squid, and so forth. If you're not an LP but you're interested, of course, always happy to chat with you. Shoot us an email, easy at felix@hartmanncapital.com. Or just send me a message on LinkedIn and we can chat. And if you're just a community member, appreciate being here. For next time, we'll be back 2 weeks from now. Spread the word. We want to grow this program and again keep it as valuable as possible. If you have any feedback, feel free to shoot us an email, shoot me a DM, and happy to integrate it. This time, it looks like we went about 75 minutes. We're going to work on making it more condensed over time. Where ideally, because it's a weekday, you can join in, listen in for 30 minutes, capture some nuggets that are actionable, insightful, and useful, maybe 30 minutes Q&A, and then wrap it. Okay? Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate the feedback, Henry. Glad you joined us, Henry, Rodolfo, JP, Xiang, Ricardo, Rahel, Oscar. Thank you all for joining. Moritz, Marcus, Marcel, Constance, Henry. We got a full house. Shivansh. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.